PorcFest is super important to me because it actually changed my life. It gave me an opportunity to explore the Free State Project in 2013, and then I moved to New Hampshire in 2014. So it didn't take long for me to decide this was where I belonged. And I left Alaska, which is a very liberty state anyway. It was very few regulations that really affected my life. It felt like when you dig deeper, obviously there's a lot more, but as a homeschooling mom of with four young children, that wasn't something that I was really aware of how much it affected my life until later. But the community that I wanted to raise my kids with, the parents that were going to let their children be free range kids and learn personal responsibility and hold them accountable for their actions, but not in a punitive way, as in a nurturing way. Those folks were in New Hampshire, and that's who I wanted to be part of. So I think it's just an amazing outreach activity. It's a festival. It's the most attended Free State Project event that we have all year. So now it's made such a positive impact on my life. I'd like to give back, and that's why I'm producing this year. PorcFest, it stands for Porcupine Freedom Festival. It is a week-long festival in Lancaster, New Hampshire, which is in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. And it's kind of a blend of a camping festival and a conference and community and, people vending without government regulation and just giving everyone a chance to practice their own freedom and their own responsibility and to have the community that they crave.
There really is nothing in the world quite like the Porcupine Freedom Festival. It's more than just going camping with 2,000 of your favorite libertarians. It is an actual pop-up society over the course of a week, where people are able to freely engage in commerce. People are setting up their own shops and vending. People are setting up their own community hubs where they're bringing in speakers from all across the country, or doing all kinds of interesting events. In the libertarian kind of philosophy, and we're looking at economists like F.A. Hayek, very famous, they talk about things like spontaneous order. You don't need a man with the bullhorn, barking orders from the top down in order to bring order to society. You just need freedom and respect for the rights of others. And within that, you get this spontaneous order emerging of just people pursuing their own interests and creating something beautiful and organic together in society. So it is the PorcFest is an opportunity to really see what a voluntary society can look like, even if only for a week. So I think that's one of the most beautiful things about the Porcupine Freedom Festival, and it's why as I have been now to several over the course of the last 10 years, it's been amazing to see how every single PorcFest has its own unique character, which is defined by the people who show up and participate.
Earlier, when I mentioned PorcFest is the largest outreach event for the Free State Project, I want to clarify what the Free State Project is for people that haven't heard about it. So the Free State Project is a movement to originally it started as getting 20,000 signers to agree to move to New Hampshire and trigger the move. And I'm actually an early mover. I moved here before we had hit the 20,000 signers. The 20,000 signers was hit February 3rd of 2016. And then from there, people had 5 years to move. And unfortunately, I don't think we have 20,000 movers yet, but we've also been networking within the community of local New Hampshireites who are the live free or die state to kind of reinforce our numbers. So we're having a huge impact on the legislature and holding the place for liberty in New England. Because if you look at our surrounding states, including Maine. I'm sorry, Eric. It is not looking positive for liberty in those states. So I think the movement is fabulous overall. I think it's very clear that it's being effective, but I think Eric can speak way more about it since he is now the executive director.
The Free State Project is a mass migration movement that's been going strong for over 2 decades now. And it's based on a really simple idea. If you are someone who loves liberty, who loves freedom, who loves the principles that are embodied in the Declaration of Independence and the US Constitution, our country was founded on these ideas, but just look around. These ideas have been forgotten in the mass popular culture and the national politics of our age, and including the politics in so many of our state capitals in this country. Just look around at what happened during COVID to know this to be true. And so if you're someone who loves freedom and liberty, if you are a libertarian or a constitutional conservative or a classical liberal, whatever label you ascribe to yourself, the hard truth is wherever you are a political minority. You are outnumbered by people who love statism and inflicting their will on their neighbors against their consent through the power of government. And if you're someone who loves liberty and you want to make a difference in your own state, as I've tried to do and I've fought to do in the state of Maine for many years, serving 3 terms in the state Senate, running for federal office twice, it still is, it's a very big uphill battle, especially when you're going against when you're a political minority. You're easily dismissed in both the politics and the culture. And so the Free State Project just asked a question. What if instead of being a political minority in one of the authoritarian 49, what if we chose to concentrate lovers of freedom and liberty in one state so that we can have an outsized impact on the politics and the culture? And in fact, really doing something that's a part of the American tradition, like so many of our ancestors did when they fled tyranny across the ocean, got in ships and sailed for 3 months to come to America looking for political freedom and political liberty. That's what free staters are doing. They're recognizing that you're never going to be free in California. You're never going to change California. So why not go to some place that loves freedom, the live free or die state, where we're building what is really amounts to a liberty homeland, a place for those who love liberty to actually be able to live liberty as a lifestyle and to achieve liberty in the laws that we live under. And to what Constance was saying, the results of this project and this effort really speak for themselves. There was just a recent study published by, I think it was the Cato Institute, Freedom in the 50 States, where they were measuring on metrics of personal and economic freedom, what states were doing it the best. New Hampshire has been ranked #1 for freedom in America year after year and maintains that position. And a part of that is you look at our state legislature, over a quarter of all the members of the New Hampshire House of Representatives, half of the Republicans in the New Hampshire House of Representatives are libertarian Republicans. And they're leading the charge on things like real school choice, education freedom accounts, where money follows the students rather than being trapped into government schools and your students being trapped there according to their zip code at the mercy of the teachers' unions. Eliminating all income taxes, all sales taxes. We're one of the least taxed states in the union, and even doing things that are on the cutting edge. New Hampshire was one of the very first states to pass constitutional carry and to be a leader on Second Amendment rights in this country. The New Hampshire House of Representatives even just passed a bill, and was one of the first legislative bodies in the country to pass this bill called Defend the Guard, calling our National Guard troops home from wars that have not been declared by Congress as the Constitution requires. It's because we have such a concentration of lovers of freedom and lovers of the principles of our Constitution that we have a legislative body that would dare defy the unconstitutional actions of the federal government. And That leadership coming out of New Hampshire, I think, also has a ripple effect across the country. But you got to have states that will lead and states that will lead on liberty. And that's what we're building in New Hampshire. So come join us, come live here. We're looking for more lovers of liberty. In fact, I hope that you'll consider it too. I know you said you might be looking for a more free place to come be in community with. Well, that's New Hampshire, and you're more than welcome. If you want more information about the Free State Project, the best place to go is fsp.org. You can learn about what we're doing. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can sign up for a call to learn more about New Hampshire and the liberty movement that is strong and robust here. So go to fsp.org, and you can also follow the Free State Project on X and Twitter and Instagram, wherever you get your social media. We are there. The benefits of coming to New Hampshire and being a part of the Free State movement is that you get to be in a community of people who share your values and not surrounded by neighbors who want to sick the government on you because you make choices in your life they don't approve of, or because they want your money that you earned to be spent on their own purposes for whatever they want. You know, we believe in a voluntary society. We believe in people being able to make their own choices in their own lives. They keep the money they earn so long as they're not hurting others, and that government should be minimal, bound by the chains of the Constitution, like our founding generation believed, but that principle has been forgot. Well, if that's what you believe, that's what we're building in New Hampshire, and the more people who come and join with us in New Hampshire, the more successful these efforts are going to be, and they're already pretty darn successful.
And as somebody who moved a decade ago, as of this month, I would have to add to that you can't really say the word community and understand it until you've lived it. So my kids have grown up in this community with people that share our values. We've co-parented together, really, where I have a close-knit group of moms who I totally trust will not try to discipline my kids in a way that shames them or punishes them randomly, but will really listen to them and help nurture them to be responsible adults. And now I have some adults, and I'll soon have another adult. And having raised my kids in this environment was just something that I think, obviously a lot of times we talk about politics, but politics for people that are raising children, that is a very different thing. It's so personal. And having the ability to be authentic with your kids because you have this community is just, it's really not something that you can describe and really feel. I can describe it, but until you feel it for yourself, it's just words. But then when you come to PorcFest and you live it, or you move here and you live it, and you're like, this is what I was missing. The liberals like to say, oh, it takes a village, and they think that means you tax people to death. But here we actually create a village, as in it's a voluntary village where people help when they can, and when people need help, they have that history with these people. We've been together for years. We know that this person really is in need. My good friend's car caught on fire, and people stepped up. We did a GoFundMe, and we got her back on the road because she was a single mom and she needed a car. She needed to get to work. And those are the kind of things, this was years before COVID. I think COVID kind of reminded people too that we need to band together. And we had a huge surge of movers in the years immediately after 2020. But also people need to keep moving. Like, we need to keep that going, because the government is going to try again to put all this tyranny on us with the next event. So if we want to keep our freedoms, we have to work together.
Well, I got involved in the libertarian movement during the Tea Party wave of 2010. I'm ashamed to say that I grew up, I think, a little brainwashed by some of the talking heads I saw on cable news. And I believed hook, line, and sinker a lot of the neoconservative agendas that were pushed in the Bush era. We got to go invade the world and make the world safe for democracy and throw out our Constitution and pass the Patriot Act and give up our civil liberties and fight all these wars and go trillions of dollars into debt. And I believed all of that. I was young and naive. I didn't know better, but it was the Tea Party. There started to be this questioning of, is this really the conservative path? Is racking up all this debt really the conservative way? What about the Constitution? What about the principles of our founders? And the person who articulated that better than anyone else was Congressman Ron Paul of Texas when he ran for president in 2008 and 2012. And I was a young person. I was just getting out of college, and I realized, boy, that national debt's going to fall on me and my generation. And I got involved. I wanted to volunteer. I got involved in his campaign. I became the state director of his presidential campaign in Maine in 2012. We actually won the state, and I kept going. I ran for state senate 2 years later, beat a Democrat incumbent who'd been in elected office for 36 years, and passed constitutional carry and a number of other kind of really strong kind of liberty issues during my terms in the Senate, and ran for federal office twice. Anyway, that's the whole long story in a nutshell. But along the way, while I was working on liberty politics and trying to advance those causes in Maine, I always saw the Free State Project in New Hampshire as these folks on a parallel way who we had a healthy competition between our two states who could advance liberty the best. Things were going well for Maine for a while, but things took a sharp left turn when Democrats swept the state in 2018 and our state's been descending into tyranny in Maine ever since. But New Hampshire has kept moving along strong. And it's been because of the Free State movement, because of all these reinforcements coming to the state of New Hampshire to counteract the progressive influences that are coming up from Massachusetts. It has been the Free State movement that has tipped the scales to keep New Hampshire free and established as the #1 state for freedom in America. And that's why it's been a long journey for me in the libertarian movement, and I've decided where I can do the most good to advance the cause of freedom is by leading the Free State Project in New Hampshire.
My story is so incredibly different that it's actually I can do a quick summary, but I was raised a Jehovah's Witness, so they're not political people at all. And then I moved to Alaska from Ohio when I was young, and I lived in Alaska and got married, had kids, almost homesteading, raised chickens, pigs, home birthed my kids, very hippie like. But then in 2008, when Sarah Palin was nominated to run for vice president, a bunch of my kind of hippie friends started talking about, well, there's this woman running for vice president in Alaska. And then I started paying attention to politics. And it did not take me long when I started paying attention to realize that I did not agree with either major political party. And somebody was like, well, you sound like a libertarian. I didn't know what a libertarian was. But yes, it's how I parent my children. It's how like my core values. And I soon after found out about the Free State Project. And after attending PorcFest in 2013, like I said earlier, I knew this is where I wanted to be. So I made the move with my 4 small kids, and I still don't follow politics super close because I mean, this year is just insane to me that the candidates that they're putting up for the presidential election are the same ones as 2020. I'm just like, what options do we have? So the options we have are to vote with your feet, which is what we did by moving to New Hampshire. And that's actually the theme of PorcFest this year is vote with your feet.
My first PorcFest was in 2012. We had just won the state of Maine for Ron Paul, but there was a big conflict because I was elected as a national delegate to go vote for him at the Republican National Convention. And the Mitt Romney campaign didn't like that a bunch of Ron Paul supporters had gotten elected, and they went to the RNC and got us kicked out, took our delegate badges away, and gave them to Mitt Romney supporters no one ever elected. It was a big fight. It was a big fight, but I appreciated that year, as we were getting ready to go and take that fight to the national convention, I got to go to my very first PorcFest and to commune with so many like Ron Paul loving libertarians who want to know all about what we were doing. And were supportive of what we were fighting for. And at the same time, it was amazing to see how many different people there were who had so many different ideas on how to advance these causes. It was a really eye-opening experience. My very first PorcFest in 2012 as a young 23-year-old kid trying to make a difference, and to see, wow, there's a really, really strong community in New Hampshire that's making it happen. So that was the context of my first PorcFest, and I keep coming back.
That's interesting, Eric. You beat me there by a year. I do actually remember watching the nominees or the delegates from, and I believe Alaska had two votes for Ron Paul, if I remember. I mean, that was a
Mm.
long time ago, but I thought they did. But anyway, I went the following year. I went in 2013, and I've gone every year since 2013. I actually had a conversation with my at the time he was my husband. We've since divorced. When we flew down from Alaska and attended PorcFest. We actually decided to make the move during PorcFest in Lancaster. We're like, yes, this is where we want to move. This is where we want to raise our kids. So to make that happen so that we could bring our kids to PorcFest from Alaska, we're like, we have to move quickly. You know, we're not flying 6 of us down next year, and we're not dragging this out. So we actually sold all our stuff and packed. We didn't drive down from Alaska. We sold our cars. We rented our house. We had a few suitcases, and we started over. And we were out of Alaska by October of 2013. So PorcFest had a huge impact on our life, and I do not regret it either. When you make a big drastic move like that with 4 small kids, there are definitely moments you're like, did I make the right choice? But I definitely made the right choice. Well, the obvious answer, it would be lovely to have Ron Paul in person, and I think everyone who's ever attended PorcFest would agree with that. We are having him this year virtually, so you can still interact with him. It's going to be a live stream, so you can ask questions and hear from him directly. But it would be lovely if he could make the trip. And then I talked to Eric about this earlier, but this week. But my big dream name is not going to be political. It's going to be Robert Kiyosaki, because he's also had such an impact on my life with his Rich Dad, Poor Dad books, and learning how to get myself out of the rat race over the years. So that's huge, and I think he reaches so many libertarians with his message, and a lot of them don't even realize they're libertarians yet. So I would really love to get him to PorcFest, because I think we could reach a totally different crowd, and it is an outreach event. And I would like to get those young entrepreneurs, those people that are willing to do things different and roll up their sleeves and get to work. That's who I want to come to PorcFest.
Well, first I'll echo what Constance has said. I would love to have Robert Kiyosaki. I remember when I was in the 7th grade, my dad gave me a copy of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I probably was the only 7th grader in my entire middle school who was reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad and Cash Flow Quadrant, these books by Robert Kiyosaki. But anyway, I think that's a great idea. But another person who has not been to PorcFest, but I tell you, I think he would love PorcFest, and I think the people of PorcFest would love to have him, and that's Elon Musk. I would love to have Elon Musk join us at PorcFest. Maybe first we make New Hampshire free, and then we can make Mars free. Maybe we get have a direct pipeline from New Hampshire to Mars. We'll colonize a whole new planet for freedom after we establish the Liberty homeland here on planet Earth in New Hampshire. So Anyway, that's maybe a bit of a pipe dream, but I don't know. You never know. We've had some big names like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. came and spoke with us, spoke last year. And Elon, if you're listening, you're always welcome.
Well, we're obviously trying to congregate people in New Hampshire, as we've mentioned. So there are not plans for the Free State Project to create PorcFest in other locations, but I have noticed over the years a lot of copycat events have popped up, and that's great because people who need community are creating it in their own states. For instance, I have friends in Michigan, and I know there's a Michigan Peace and Liberty Coalition that happens, I believe it's towards the end of July this year, and it's a very similar thing. Like it's like an early PorcFest, you know, where a couple hundred people got together at Rogers Campground 21 years ago, and they just hung out, and now it's grown into this huge gathering with speakers and all different kinds of things, like we mentioned earlier. So I don't think I'm going to put any effort into doing anything except getting people to New Hampshire, but I do appreciate the people that are copying that. I just wish that they would join us here.
You can't take PorcFest out of New Hampshire. PorcFest and New Hampshire are like peanut butter and jelly, right? They naturally go together, right? If you tried to do PorcFest in, I don't know, in upstate California, it wouldn't be PorcFest, right? That's some other festival. Hey, great, go have a Liberty Festival in the state of hellhole of California, though upstate California is pretty nice. I know they've been trying to secede for a long time and become the state of Jefferson. Hope they succeed one day. But no, PorcFest will always be in New Hampshire. It'll always be in the Liberty homeland, the Granite Fortress of Freedom, New Hampshire. Now, as far as outreach to people across the country and getting them to come to New Hampshire for PorcFest, I mean, that's the whole point. Obviously, a lot of Free Staters and native Granite Staters who are already here in New Hampshire come to PorcFest, obviously. But we have people coming from all across the country, all across the world are coming to PorcFest. I mean, I keep reading, if I could read German, I guess I would be reading it, but there's like German publications who are like people who are enthusiasts about the Free State Project and what we're doing, and the Porcupine Freedom Festival who are like who are publishing articles in German publications telling people to come to PorcFest and come see what liberty is really like. So there are tremendous outreach efforts, and of course, doing programs like these and reaching your audience is something that I'm regularly doing on so many platforms. And I'll always tell people, remember, you got to go to porcfest.com to get your tickets. That's pork with a C, not a K, because if you go to porkwithak.com, I don't know, maybe you're going to find some barbecue festival in upstate California. That's not the Family Freedom Festival you're looking for. But wherever you are, jump on a plane, a train, a boat, however you come to Lancaster, New Hampshire. We want you there to experience what real Liberty community is like.
As producer, I got to help direct some of the speakers. I didn't do all of them. I have an amazing volunteer, Olga Sorens, who is also the wife of the founder of the Free State Project. It was his doctorate paper, I can get this right, that was the idea that started the Free State Project. So she's been getting most of the speakers, but I did request Dana Martin, who is an unschooled mom and an author, who I was very influenced by early on in my raising children. So I'm excited to have her. And then also Spike Cohen is coming, and I'm excited to have him talk about what he's doing. I don't want to go too much into it, but he had a meet and greet here in Manchester, New Hampshire recently, and he was explaining some of his very direct action. And you probably have picked up a lot that I'm way more a direct action community building type of person than I am a follow national politics kind of person. So I'm really, although I do know that he ran as the Libertarian candidate for president, I think I get that right. But yeah, I think there's such a great mix. There's so many interesting economists that are coming this time, and it's just, I mean, there's so many parts of our lives that are touched by liberty, and she's Olga's done such a great job of getting such a mix of speakers.
I could pick any number of speakers to say I'm excited about. Ron Paul, David Friedman, Spike Cohen, they're all going to be great. But what I'm most excited about is we, the people, gathering together, having real community for an entire week. That's what's most exciting, the community.
There are so many activities for the kids. We have an entire Porcupines track. So there's activities that are scheduled. There's also activities that just spontaneously happen. The playground is always extremely fun for the kids because it's a very old campground. So it's a very old playground where the merry-go-rounds actually fling you off. There's no safety features in this playground. The kids really enjoy it. We do have the free aid staff close by if needed, but for the most part, the kids are really good at knowing what their limits are and what they can handle. Every year there's tie-dyeing, there's humans versus zombies, there's something called boffer making, which is basically making like a foam sword, a piece of pipe and duct tape. Kids love that. And then there's educational things that happen in the Porcupine. It's called a bingo hall at the campground, but that's where it's at. And so there's educational, there's movies nights. But one of the greatest things as a person who's raised 4 kids going to PorcFest for over 10 years now is the kids bending. The kids are so entrepreneurial, I can get the word right. And it's great to see them out learning these real life skills because they don't have that opportunity when they're home. You know, they're either in a neighborhood where there's nobody else out, or they're in the country where the neighbors are far apart. And so to have this big gathering where they feel safe to walk around and just approach somebody and be like, do you want to buy this? And people are yes, no. That is the part that I love the most.
It is a family-friendly freedom festival. As Constance mentioned, there is this parallel track of Porcupines, and I'm excited that I'm going to be participating a little bit with Porcupines because I'm doing 2 things with the kids. For kids under the age of 10, I'm going to be doing a story time reading of the Tuttle Twins and the creature from Jekyll Island, because we got to let the kids know young about the dangers of central banking and the Federal Reserve. So I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be a lot of fun. And for the older kids, 10 and older, I'm going to be doing a mock legislature. And so we're going to make all of the participating kids, they're going to be state representatives for the day. We're going to go through the process of how a bill becomes a law. We're going to take their ideas from bill proposal all the way to the governor's veto. Or maybe the governor doesn't veto it. We'll see what happens. There'll be high drama about what happens to their bill. But I am really looking forward to seeing what they actually come up with. When I've done this exercise with students in my own district that I represent in Maine, I've got a lot of great ideas, but I was always the most excited when they came up with freedom ideas and not like new laws to police people and tell them what to do. I have absolute confidence that this group of kids are going to be jumping over themselves to like abolish, what government agencies are they going to seek to abolish? Hopefully after the Tuttle Twins book, they'll be going straight for after the Federal Reserve. We'll see what they come up with.
I would recommend to any first timers to actually volunteer, which seems kind of counterproductive because it's your first time and you want to check out all the talks but I find that a lot of people that come to these events are similar to me, and the fact that they're a little more introverted and a little harder time just really integrating. But if they pitch in and help, the next thing they know, they have a few familiar faces that they can be like, hey, I sat at the registration tent with that guy and we checked people in and I recognize you from checking in. And it really does help us as the organizers, and it helps the attendees to jump in and volunteer. And as far as what to bring, please bring drinking water, because unfortunately the campground is old and that's been an issue in the past. So it's always good to have enough drinking water. On PorcFest.com, there is a place for you to sign up to volunteer ahead of time. You have to go to PorcFest.com, then the contact tab, and then when the drop down, there is a volunteering. So it's PorcFest.com/contact/volunteer to go to a form. And when you get to that form, there is the departments that need help. So if you happen to be, an EMT and you want to help with free aid, we have space. If you're interested in doing the voluntary security, we have the rangers. If you want to just meet people and greet them, like I said, registration. So there's facilities. If you want to help pick up the trash, we are very, very grateful for anybody who will help haul trash. So there's also facilities. So many different ways that your talents can be used. So it's really actually exciting to talk about vending at PorcFest because I co-produced last year with Dennis Pratt, who has been using the last couple of years to create what he calls hubs of activities. I apologize here, we have a guest that's stick around for a minute. So the hubs of activities, the way he described it is, it's like mini festivals within a bigger festival. So if your particular brand of Liberty is you're super interested in, I don't know, crypto, you can have a hub and get other crypto people to come and talk about what you're interested in. If somebody else is interested in precious metals, they can have a hub. And we do. Actually, one of our prime sponsors this year is Alpine Gold to talk about precious metals. So the hubs of activity are super important for our festival because it's more than just a conference, like we said before. Although there are FSP speakers, there's way more to that. So it's actually quite simple. You buy a ticket, but then you get a campsite on site. And then we have on the PorcFest.com, very first page, it tells you how to tell us which site you have. You upload your receipt from Rogers Campground, we approve you, and you start adding events, a calendar of events to your own campsite. And it's an interactive map this year that is brand new. So I'm excited about it. I've spent a lot of time over this last year since last PorcFest ended trying to figure out how to make it a little more user-friendly. And it'll be our first time using it, but I'm very excited. So that's PorcFest.com at calendar XXI. It's viewable from anybody listening. They can see what kind of events we have. You just can't edit it unless you have a ticket. You can't sign in and interact with the events. But when you do sign in, you can add comments like, I'm super excited to smell campfires, which I'm going to do because I'm going to have an event roasting marshmallows so we can have s'mores with folks. So it's going to be great.
I think that the biggest threat to the libertarian movement is discouragement and demoralization and just getting frustrated and people dropping out because they will fight and fight and fight for liberty, but they're doing it in states where they're just going to lose and lose and lose because they are outnumbered by people who don't understand liberty and want authoritarian government controlling the lives of their neighbors. So that's the great threat to libertarianism. But that is countered by the free state movement because we don't have to fight losing battles. We can concentrate in one place. We can you can come to New Hampshire, you can be a part of this free state movement, and you can actually experience what it's like to be in liberty community where you don't have to get demoralized. You don't have to lose over and over again because in New Hampshire, we're winning. And so we can defeat that threat.
I actually find that when you move here, it's quite the opposite. There's so much to get involved and you actually can get burnt out the other direction because you're being so effective. You want to help in all the things. So that's one of the things I've noticed as a producer of PorcFest is that when I'm having a day where I feel like there's so much going on and so many irons in the fire and I'm a little overwhelmed, somebody will just randomly message me and thank me for what I'm doing. And it makes all the difference. So I know that what I'm doing here in New Hampshire is effective and it's helping people because they let me know. So thank you to anyone who has ever let me know. It does mean a lot.
I do see an influx of the younger generation into the libertarian movement. And where I saw this to a great degree before I worked um, at the Free State Project. I worked at Young Americans for Liberty. So I guess I had a front row seat to see the young people who are coming into the liberty movement. And I think a lot of these young people certainly were students on college campuses who were being forcibly masked and forcibly vaccinated with the COVID vaccine against their will if they just wanted to get an education and attend classes. I think that what happened during COVID woke a lot of people up of all ages, but nowhere nearly as much as on these tyrannical college campuses where people felt the boot of authority more than almost anywhere else. So, and that is encouraging to me. Of course, the beautiful thing that what Ron Paul did was he inspired a wave of young people, of people with idealism, saying we can believe, we can dream of a better country, a better America, where we restore our founding ideals and we restore those ideas of liberty. And I think that liberty is very much still a young idea, and it does speak to, I think, those who are still young at heart and who are capable of dreaming of something better. So we're dreaming of that in New Hampshire, and folks young and old and in between, you're welcome to be a part of it here.
I could speak about the young people that have been raised here because at this point, I'm parents to two young adults who've been raised here, and I've watched other kids grow up here, and they are definitely unique in their position in life compared to a lot of like the folks that I run into who are more indoctrinated into like the world is ending. Like these kids have drive and they have purpose and they're accomplishing things at a much younger age than I see a lot of other folks who just are like, well, what can I do? There's nothing I can do. Like the economy's in the tank and everything is going bad. And so the kids, they have goals that they know that they can accomplish. They understand that the government is trying to steal their future, and they realize that they have to come up with alternative ways to live their life. And instead of just giving up, I like watching these kids grow up here and find their own unique path forward in life. And that's really exciting.
I would recommend you read The Revolution Manifesto by Ron Paul. That's the book that made me a libertarian, and I can't give any greater recommendation than that.
I would like to dispel the myth that we are heartless, because I am the opposite of that. I am a libertarian because I want people to have opportunities and I want to help the people that are not born into wealth. That's where I came from. And it's so saddening to me to see how so many caring people have bought into this idea that government's going to help, and they're giving all their wealth to this tyranny, and then they're blaming the freedom-loving people for saying, "Can you please stop stealing from us?" And it's just so frustrating to me to see this repeated over and over and over, that libertarians got there, so forget the rest of you. And that's not at all. I'm actually doing the best I've ever done in my life, so I have more time to give back to other people now than I ever did before when I was struggling single mom who could barely feed my kids. So that is the myth I would like to dispel.
So Constance has already dispelled, I think, one of the most pernicious myths. And I want to echo that first of all. Absolutely. Um, Selfishness is stealing from people the money that they earned to use for purposes that you think it should be used for. Compassion is not something you do with other people's money that you've taken from them against their will, right? Compassion is giving and sharing and giving back voluntarily, and that's the kind of society that we want to build. But another myth that I would like to see dispelled is this idea that libertarianism means libertine, right? Libertarianism means that you just are socially degenerate and you want people to be committing all kinds of vices, and that's certainly there are some libertarians who are libertines, and that, hey, they do what they want as long as they're not harming other people. We'll try to we should maybe perhaps try to persuade people. Libertarianism just means though that we don't want to use violence against people who are otherwise being peaceful. Like if someone's making bad decisions that are harmful in their own life, let's talk to them about it. Let's be compassionate. Let's try to persuade them there's a better way. But I know many libertarians who are like adamant, devout Christians who would live some of the most moral, upright lives you would ever see. They just don't believe in using violence against people to tell them how to live. So let's use the force of persuasion, not the force of government.
It's really interesting, and I don't think we're going to know until the convention is over whether it was a positive or negative. Last year at PorcFest, we'd had RFK, and it was a huge turnout, and it was extremely popular event. Definitely the largest line I've ever seen to get into the pavilion, but also the flip side of that is that people had to go through metal detectors, and it was a gun-free zone, which caused a tremendous amount of controversy at PorcFest because we are not a place where you have to hide your firearms. Like we have meetups specifically for firearms. So there was a lot of controversy and a lot of eyes on PorcFest. I was really hoping that we would get more of the liberty-leaning RFK Jr. supporters into the Free State Project, and I don't know if that's actually happened. But then, of course, most people, myself excluded, don't move within a year of their first PorcFest. So maybe the positive will be happening. I can't really say more than that. I mean, I do understand as an event organizer wanting to have a lot of eyes on your event. That makes a lot of sense to me. And it might be really interesting to have Trump and RFK Jr. have a bunch of libertarians throwing them hardball questions. I would appreciate seeing that, but I'm not going, even though I am part of the Libertarian Party, because I'm going to be super busy planning PorcFest.
Personally, I think it's a tremendous positive for the liberty movement, the libertarian movement, that Donald Trump and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. are going to the Libertarian Party National Convention. And here's why. I think we all understand, whether we admit it to ourselves or not, right? We all understand that the Libertarian Party nominee for president is not going to be the next president of the United States. But that person will be running to put the message out there and to give people the vehicle to vote for the person they agree with the most, even if historically the Libertarian Party candidate doesn't get more than a couple percentage points in the polls. But the value of a third party is also beyond just kind of the educational ability, is to demonstrate that there is a block of voters out there that are neither committed Republicans nor committed Democrats, and they have issues they care about. And that's a block of swing voters that can make the difference in a big race like this. And so the fact that Donald Trump and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. are coming to the Libertarian Party National Convention is a demonstration that the libertarians have power in this presidential race, because these folks, because they want those votes. They need those votes. And so that puts libertarians in a powerful position to say, you got to come to us and you got to talk to us on our issues. What are you going to do to end these wars? What are you going to do to make sure that Julian Assange and Edward Snowden and Ross Ulbricht are free of this unjust persecution by the federal government? What are you going to do to restore sanity in the budget of our United States government, which we're so many trillions of dollars in debt now. It's beyond all recognition. So libertarians have a great opportunity to really make these candidates have to come to them and speak to their issues. And the truth is in politics that the people who get catered to are swing voters. If you're a voter who's going to get on the back of the bus for the Republican no matter what, or on the back of the bus for the Democrat no matter what, then those candidates, they don't care what you think. They don't care if you don't agree with them on the issues because they know they're going to vote for you because you're theoretically better than the other guy. You're the lesser evil. But libertarians don't operate that way, right? We're not getting on the back of the bus for anyone. And so it's up to Trump and it's up to RFK to come and make their case and not just give, the same stump speeches that they would give anywhere else. Libertarians have real issues that we care about. I think that libertarians need to play hard to get, not impossible to get. It is no coincidence that the century of total war has coincided with the century of central banking. Central banking is one of the greatest evils in society. The ability to manipulate the currency, the ability to print trillions of dollars out of thin air and counterfeit value. This robs the savings and the paychecks of the American people, and it does it silently in a way that politicians like Joe Biden get to turn around and blame mom and pop small businesses and call them greedy. Well, it's the government greed that is doing this, and central banking is the mechanism in which it's done. So yes, end the Fed, and I would say that so many folks in the Free State movement in New Hampshire are leading the efforts to end the Fed, not necessarily by going to Congress and passing a bill to end the Fed, but by disregarding it, creating parallel systems like cryptocurrency. New Hampshire was the cradle of Bitcoin, nursed it when it was in the cradle and made it big and strong. The early adopters for Bitcoin were in New Hampshire, and now it is the global phenomenon that it is, and it's making the central bankers nervous. And we're also leading in New Hampshire on sound money policy for traditional sound monies, gold and silver. In fact, as I think as Constance mentioned, one of our great sponsors for PorcFest this year is an organization called Alpine Gold, and they sell and create these gold backs, which are these like gold notes that make it actually easy to transact with like a $4 of gold. You could buy a cup of coffee with gold, right? That's amazing. And New Hampshire policies where there's no sales tax on gold and silver, there's no income tax on gold and silver. It makes it easy for people to legally use constitutional money again and disregard the funny money from the Federal Reserve.
Well, I happen to have a gold back right here next to me in my purse, so I can show you exactly what they look like. This is the $1, which I believe is actually over $4 now. Last time I looked, it was closer to $5 of fiat money worth. And this is a New Hampshire one. They do come from different states. I had a tenant who was paying me rent in gold back, so I'm just going to keep those because I know what happens to fiat money. And these are sound money. So yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, I have a tenant. I'm also a realtor, and it's so disheartening to see what happened in 2020 and all these folks who were in the process of trying to buy a home, and then now they can't because their dollars have gone down so quickly and their wages are not keeping up. So I'm 100% behind it. The liberty movement as a whole understands in a way that I wish other people could understand how this invisible tax works.
Say immigration is an issue that there is no consensus within the libertarian movement on. In fact, the libertarian movement is strongly divided on it. So I wouldn't presume to speak for all libertarians. But I would say my own personal perspective it is that in a system, I think Milton Friedman said it best. It's just obvious you can't have open borders and a welfare state, right? And we live in a welfare state. And when we say that we're going to have open borders and anyone can come, you're obligating the U.S. taxpayers to pay for anyone in the world. There are billions of people in the world. They could all show up here, and we're all going to give them free education, free health care, general assistance, and on and on and on. That's unsustainable. That would bankrupt us. That's not a system that works. And that, not to mention, on top of that, when you're here, and there's also a pathway to be able to vote and to be able to vote to change our laws and to impose tyrannies on people, and that's a concern too. So because of the welfare state and because of the implications of the ability to vote and change our forms of government, I think that gives people a lot of pause about the mass immigration that's taking place, and it needs to be something that is done much more thoughtfully. Don't have government push DEI policies. I suppose that's the answer. What's the free market solution? I mean, I don't think these policies are coming up organically in the context of the free market. I think this is something that's being pushed through political agendas. So, yeah, don't have government fund it.
So interesting, I mentioned Jason Sorens earlier. He is now employed at AIER and does a ton of research into zoning, and one of the biggest issues with housing is zoning. I can't beat the dead horse of the fact that they're printing so much money that the houses aren't really getting that expensive. It's the dollars going down, but I've already said that a couple times. So, we have to get rid of ridiculous zoning and building codes and things like that. We used to be able to build a house on a big lot and build a second one when we needed to. I actually came from a family farm where my uncle's children, 4 of them built houses right on the farm, and you can't do that in many places because of zoning. So pretty much like every libertarian answer I would give is, I don't know the exact solution, but I know government's messing it up.
Well, first of all, you got to abolish the Federal Reserve. In all seriousness, I mean, that is part of the problem, right? We have a central bank that is depreciating the currency and putting artificial credit into the system, and that tends to pool and concentrate in certain sectors of the economy. And historically, that has been housing, and so you see the price of housing being driven up much more than a lot of other areas of the economy historically. And I think that's a big part of it. It's the easy money, the funny money that's in our system that's contributing to this. But then there are many other policies that are problematic too, include that are creating an artificial scarcity in housing. So part of the problem, as I see it, is that because we can't actually save our money, and save our value in dollars, right? The home equity has become the middle class savings account, right? And so people put their savings, because they can't save in dollars, they're putting their savings into home equity. And that means that you have an incentive at that point to want to make sure housing prices stay high and keep getting higher and keep getting more expensive. And so people now have an incentive to pursue policies in their communities to restrict new housing construction. We have people we have massive homeless problems because people can't, there's just isn't enough housing available on the market, and people are being restricted in the ability to build new housing. And of course, young people like my generation, I'm trying to become a first-time home buyer myself, and I'm experiencing just how difficult and expensive it is. And it's the housing prices have like nearly doubled in just the a couple of years. It's a broken system. Now, we did have the opportunity back in 2008. There was a correction and housing prices came down, right? You would think that would be wonderful. That means housing became more affordable. But instead, the federal government responded by saying, this is a disaster. We need to bail out this entire industry to keep housing prices artificially high, right? So instead of allowing the market to correct and housing prices to come down and for us to get affordable housing, because so much is built upon housing prices being artificially expensive, the government does everything they can to keep those propped high and housing out of the reach of so many Americans. So let's just stop it and let the market work. I would say that libertarians generally recognize that one of the last things our government should be doing is taking money from the hardworking people of America and transferring it to foreign governments, right? And that's what foreign aid is, as Congressman Ron Paul has often said. It's taking money from poor people in a rich country and giving it to rich people in a poor country. Yeah, that needs to end. I know that it's a small drop in the bucket overall when it comes to the overall federal budget, but it should be one of the easiest things to cut because it's done at the expense of the American people, and it's not even necessarily helping the people that the politicians are claiming to want to help. It's just empowering governments to more centrally control the economies and the people that they rule over. The Libertarian Party is a political party, much like the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. It's an actual organization with political infrastructure that people organize under. But the libertarian movement is an idea. It's a philosophy. And you don't have to be a big L libertarian, a member of the Libertarian Party, to be a small L libertarian. In fact, I'm a small L libertarian, but I'm a registered Republican because I've found for myself that working through the Republican Party has been the most effective vehicle for me to make a difference in advancing liberty policies. So that's the difference. Americans should care about the libertarian movement, and by extension, the free state movement that is achieving liberty in our lifetimes in the state of New Hampshire, because this is what America was founded on. This is what it's all about. This country was founded as a libertarian nation. Just look at the Declaration of Independence. That government exists to protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's the libertarian credo. That government isn't supposed to be in the middle of our lives, telling you how to raise your kids, telling you regulating how your toilets flush. Like this is absurd. This is not what our American republic was founded on. It was founded on libertarian ideals. The Declaration of Independence is one of the most libertarian documents ever crafted. So if you love America and you love what America was founded on, then you should love the libertarian movement because that's all we're about.
And for me, it's a totally different answer because I think that Americans should care because it's an actual solution. And everyone can see that government is just fighting the lesser of two evils, or this is bad, but that guy's worse. And they've not offered us any type of solution. They just try to sell us on fear. So if you really want to make, if you really want to make the American lives better, then you have to have solid solutions. And unfortunately, you can never get away from the fact that economics exists. You can't dream it away. You can't print it away. It exists. And if you want to have a good future for your kids, you have to work hard, invest, build that future. And the government is doing everything it can to prevent you from doing that. So if you love people, if you come from a different point of view, like than the constitutional libertarians, but if you come from more a left version where you want the environment protected and you want the kids protected, you need to find out what liberty is, because that's the only thing that's going to give you those things.
Well, if all we had was a libertarian president and nothing else, if the Congress was still statist and all the states were still statist and the culture was still, I mean, a libertarian president could do a few things on his own, I suppose, or her own. Maybe the first libertarian president is going to be Constance, and and I would vote for her. Um, but a libertarian president could bring the troops home and stop fighting all of these pointless wars around the world that seem to only benefit the war profiteers in the military-industrial complex. That alone would be huge, because as Murray Rothbard said, war is the health of the state. And if you can end the pointless, wasteful, bloody wars, you will end the worst things that our government does. If we had libertarians throughout the entire federal apparatus of our government, well, then I suppose the federal government would do very little. I suppose a lot of the federal agencies would be abolished. The Department of Education would be gone. The Federal Reserve would be gone. We would probably just have a few basic federal agencies in place for the purpose of interfacing with the rest of the world. That was Thomas Jefferson's vision, that we were supposed to be one when facing out to the world, but many when it comes to our internal relations with each other in America. And a lot of the decisions of this country would be taking place much more on the local level and on the state levels. And we would be content understanding that different states, we're 50 different societies in this country, and we're going to come up with different solutions to different things. California, let California be California, but let New Hampshire be New Hampshire. Let us be free and stop trying to boss us around from the halls of Washington, D.C.
I think I've really got to say what's important to me through your question about like the myths about libertarianism, because I really want people to know that, we say don't hurt people and don't take their stuff, and that's a great starting point, but life is so much more round and full when you're helping others and when you're working on improving like what's going on inside your head and your negative self-talk. Like those are things that are super important to me, and I hope that your audience is doing more than fighting against government, but they're also doing things to enrich in their own lives.
What's really important to me is this torch of liberty that's been passed down from generation to generation. From in our American experiment, you could talk about from Thomas Jefferson until today, but you could even go back further. You could go back to Cato, the last defender of the Roman Republic, standing for liberty as his country fell to tyranny and empire. This torch has been passed from generation to generation, and now it's in our hands. And the question is, what are we going to do with it? Ronald Reagan, who you can critique for many things from a libertarian perspective, but he said some pretty brilliant things. What always sticks in my mind is when he said that freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. It's not something passed on through the bloodstream. It's something that must be fought for, protected, and handed on to the next generation for them to do the same. Or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children about that time in America when men and women were free. That's where we are. The torch of liberty has never burned so dim in America as it does today. And so the care for that very precious flame of liberty, it's our responsibility. And are we going to be the generation that lets it go extinguished and lets it get snuffed out? And we're just telling stories to our children and our children's children about what America used to be. I really fear that that's what we're on the precipice of. Certainly when we look at what happened during COVID, when we look at how gladly so many people just surrendered all of our most basic and fundamental freedoms to the state out of fear and a desire for security. You know what? Benjamin Franklin warned us. He said, those who give up precious liberty to gain temporary security will lose both and deserve neither. And that's what we saw during COVID. So what's important to me is that we don't let that torch go extinguished, and that in New Hampshire, We are gathering people together who are going to be the torchbearers to keep that flame of liberty burning bright. And I see it. I see it every day. I see it with the families that are raising their children. They're having them in homeschool communities that share their values. They're really sharing with that next generation the responsibility of being the guardians of liberty for their times ahead. So that's what's important. Passing it on as it was passed on to us, and let us not be the last generation. Let us not be the ones who let liberty die in America.
So PorcFest.com is the one stop to find the schedule, the map, the tickets. Just go there, find tips for first timers. It's there's a ton of information there. But if you want to interact with folks beyond the interactive map, then you can find us on all the social media platforms. We use Telegram. There's chat groups in Telegram that are linked from our website. There's a Facebook group. There's Twitter or X. So many different ways to find out more about PorcFest. As long as you spell it with the C.
And after you've gone to PorcFest.com and gotten your ticket for this family-friendly freedom festival, the Libertarian Burning Man in Lancaster, New Hampshire, which you don't want to miss. It's going to be amazing, like it is every year. After you've gotten your tickets, then you're going to want to go to fsp.org to learn more about the broader Free State movement and what we're doing in the state of New Hampshire. So come to PorcFest for a week and then stay in New Hampshire for a lifetime. You can find the Free State Project on X, Facebook, Instagram, Discord, Telegram, Signal. Like we're everywhere. It feels like we're everywhere anyway. So find us on your favorite social media platform. I will also note that I have my own weekly podcast called The Porcupine Report, which broadcasts every single Wednesday at 7 p.m. on all of our channels. And my most recent guest was Constance talking about PorcFest. So you can go check out that episode and so many more that we've had. One of the people's favorite episodes was an interview I did with Glenn Kane Jacobs, the mayor of Knox County, Tennessee, who's also a WWE wrestling superstar and was a guest at a Free State, one of our Free State events, the New Hampshire Liberty Forum, earlier this year. So you can check that out on all of our platforms. The Porcupine Report.
Always like a shout out to my entire management team doing PorcFest because they're working so hard.